Okay, thanks, guys. Let's just start this off with a quick round of intros. So, Ben, we can start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ben Beckmann. I'm the Chief Technical Representative for the Midnight Foundation. So you may have seen the buses out front and heard about Midnight this week as we just released our tokenomics paper on Monday. So I'll be around after this event to answer any questions you have.
Hi, I'm Dan Elitzer. I'm a founder of Nascent. We are early stage investors across the crypto ecosystem. We focus a lot on DeFi, a lot on security. We also are very active both on and off chain with our trading teams as well, and just a lot of interest in the space.
Hello, I'm Uma. I'm the co-founder of Succinct, a company building a ZK VM and prover network protocol that makes ZK really easy to use and fast and cheap.
Hey, thanks, y'all. I want to start this off high level. So maybe Uma, I'll put this one to you. What do we even mean by security in ZK?
I guess there's like cryptographic security, which is kind of like how many bits of security there is in like your protocol. Then there's like the actual security of the implementation, which can be theoretically secure, but in practice have bugs. That's kind of like a concern for all these systems because it's very frontier cryptography. But there's a lot of work on formal verification that us and other teams have engaged with recently to kind of help solve those problems. So I would say like it is still a bit early on the security side of things. Like I don't think any team would say, oh, our system's perfect, it has no bugs. But in terms of practical scenarios, there's a lot you can do to mitigate that, including using multiple provers, including using systems like TEs and having backups or only allowing certain provers to like submit. So in practice, I think the security can actually be pretty good if you're pragmatic about it.
Yeah, I think there's security of ZK systems, and I think there's also really interesting implications for security broadly for smart contracts as a result of the increased efficiency that you get from ZK approaches, right? We're used to operating and building contracts in a very, very resource and compute constrained environment. If you're able to do a lot more compute, you can do a lot more checks on individual transactions and at the contract level. So you can do those all off chain and then submit a single proof to show the security of the transaction that you're trying to do. And I think that's one of the ways that we can actually increase a lot of our smart contract security using ZK tools.
I want to just take this from a little different perspective, right? So like you as the user, what do you get from ZK? And specifically what do you get is you get to reveal as little information as possible, right? Are you 18? Yes or no? I don't need to know your address for that particular question or your height. But that type of information is what's actually valuable because now you can participate, both openly or selectively disclose information that you decide, and you don't have to reveal it all to the app or dApp provider. It's just kind of basic signal and telemetry that this type of technology removes from the system. So you simply don't have it. So people can't target me because I have a coffee habit where every day at 9 a.m. I'm at the local convenience store buying the same thing. That information just isn't present because all that is really present is a transaction occurred. And depending on how you use the technology, it may not even reveal that it was me at that particular convenience store and what I bought. And so that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to add security so that it allows for the users to participate in the way that they want to, as opposed to what the underlying technology supports.
Okay, great. So all three of you all have touted some of these benefits of ZK from a security point of view. You know, it's also been called the holy grail for privacy, for scalability. But right now, where is ZK falling short? Let's start with you, Dan.
I think where it's falling short is it's not being used, right? Broadly, right? We're seeing, we saw very early on, Zcash getting a lot of adoption around like on the privacy side. We've been seeing ZK rollups and systems being deployed by folks like Starkware and Matter Labs over the last few years, but it's still not commonly used. And so I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think Succinct is really one of the teams that's kind of pushing the ball forward on that front. But there's like the compute costs, the proving time. When we get into more kind of privacy focused use case applications, there's a lot of UX challenges where we're used to blockchains, everything being transparent. There's a lot of user expectations that have developed around that are then broken, in some ways good, in some ways challenging ways. So I think it's a combination of needing technical advances and then really kind of developing new UX, UI paradigms for the more private approaches.
Yeah, I think the reason ZK has not been used as much as people would have liked is that even 1 year ago, to build anything with ZK, you required multiple cryptography PhDs. So that's kind of like a non-starter for building anything expressive or anything super complicated, unless it's a really specific application like a ZK EVM where you had a bunch of teams built for that one use case. But I think with things like SP1 or ZK VM, where you can just write normal code and use ZK, that has dramatically expanded the set of things that you can even build. And so actually we're starting to see this wave of applications that previously weren't literally possible built with SP1. So for example, we have a few teams building verifiable exchanges with ZK, and they're live and they're using these proofs on mainnet with like appropriate safeguards. And that wasn't even something that was possible to build a year ago because they would have to have multiple cryptography PhDs to even encode this logic, and they would never be able to upgrade it or add features or anything like that. So I think now that we have this programmable tool, we actually will see a lot more adoption in the upcoming years because it's like finally possible to actually build.
Yeah, I want to agree with that very much, right? The tools, getting up to speed on the tools, knowing how to use the tools, the adoption curve there is huge. And we need tools like SP1 and Compact from Midnight to enable developers to build these out so that they can build applications easier. They can have languages that they understand and they can be able to get the capability out of it. The other place that I think we're hung up on is what can the technology be used for and where can it be used well? So there's certain types of mathematics that just simply doesn't work very well in ZK. Or even, for example, like a card game, a poker game. How do you distribute the cards if it's ZK? And then how do you shuffle, reorder, and then ensure that they get transferred correctly? These types of things in our more traditional mindset are pretty easy because we're not really worried about it. We just kind of encrypt it and send it over there. And if the dealer knows what the cards are, that's not such a bad activity. But when you start to introduce ZK, you start to think, well, I can actually enable these physical games in a Web3 space, but then you run across all of these problems of, well, how do I actually distribute the cards? How do I change hands with who owns those cards? And ZK by itself simply doesn't solve the whole problem. You need to start to introduce other technologies into the space that are supportive, but getting over that adoption curve is absolutely a must so that we have tools that people can actually program the technology in, and then they'll learn after the fact what it's good for so that they can apply it appropriately.
That's some really interesting points. I asked where does it fall short. Uma and Dan, you mentioned it's not being used. That's clearly true. And you also mentioned the tooling isn't there. There was some recent news, and I think to all of your points, on Google integrating ZK into their wallet, and it's to obscure the age use of identification, right? So it seems like ZK is picking up a little bit more, but this is outside of the blockchain space, right? So is this a good thing? Do we like to see ZK outside being used by other practitioners, or is this like competition entering and limits? If ZK is being used outside of blockchain, then does that devalue the use of ZK in blockchain? Ben?
I like adoption in kind of any form. So having large organizations like a Google come into this space and start to use technology, I think that'll just promote it as it goes on. If you look in the verifiable credentials space and you think of verifiable presentation is ZK, which it can be, can't be. Those have been in play in things like Active Directory for a couple of years now. So it's there. It just simply is in the part of the system that you don't see. So I think the technology, even with these big hitters coming into play, will actually lift all boats because they'll start to use tools like we provide, and they'll give us feedback on what they like and what they don't like. And as long as we're good listeners will be able to adopt those tools to help support both the big and the small enterprises that want to participate.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I definitely think it's really good. And I actually think some of the most interesting use cases of ZK are in fact outside of blockchains. Like we've really covered ZK EVMs, L2s, rollups, verifiable exchanges. All that is really great. And it's like starting to take off. But ZK identity, where you can like hide private information and only give information on exactly what you want to reveal to people. ZK, like attested image editing, where you kind of have a proof of provenance that an image came from a real camera as opposed to like a large model. All those use cases are outside of blockchain, and in some ways, like maybe more interesting, maybe going to have more impact, have more adoption. So I think it's very, very cool.
It's interesting. You bring up the camera with these AIs coming in, and there seems to be more of a push to link AI and ZK, specifically maybe in the security side. But can ZK really be used to keep AI in check, or is that just wishful thinking? Dan?
Look, I think these guys probably have a better sense on a technical side. Whether that can be the case, I don't think it's really like the answer for keeping AI in check. I've seen some teams approaching things saying that we can do kind of like ZK like provable inference and things like that. I think it is cool that that is possible. I do not think that users actually care. It's going to be additional overhead, and I don't think people want that. I think their cost and speed are going to be primary, and the market's going to punish you if you're not running the inference you say you're running like very, very quickly. So I don't think it's a big solve in my mind, at least.
Yeah, I agree. Provable inference is not super interesting for the grand majority of use cases. Like, who cares if your cursor output is provable? If they're giving you a bad model, you're just going to switch to another alternative. Where I do think ZK is interesting for keeping AI in check is this attested image or attested sensor kind of provability that I talked about previously. So for example, today in your browser, you have this green lock that you're connected to a website, and it's the actual real website and your connection is secure. Imagine now that every single picture on Twitter has kind of a green check mark secured by a ZK proof saying this was a picture from a real camera that was then transformed in like certain allowed ways, like cropping, rotating, whatever, to show that it was from an actual journalist or an actual real human being. I think stuff like that is very, very interesting and kind of where I see ZK X AI's intersection being.
I'd love to see that. I think it needs to go like much deeper though, and like you need to start including data from other sensors on the camera. Otherwise, I'm gonna generate an AI image and then take a picture of it, right? Like, so it's not just that it was taken by a camera. You need to tap into the other sensors as well.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point. Like, I guess if you try to push it to its limits, there might always be some like attack vector, but it's certainly better than nothing, right? Or like zero proof that you have no idea where this came from.
Well, and along those lines, I think if you look at the technology, how it's evolving, right? It's generative AI these days. That's the new sexy term. And that's very much kind of how you and me came to be, right? So you could have, let's say, a child that you trained on facts, on everything with a little lock that you can prove came from a camera, came from a reputable source, so on and so forth. So their interlife training, you can control that, and you can understand that this model has only experienced things that are factual, we'll just call it. All right, well, now you start to mix these genetics generation after generation after generation, and things that have kind of ingrained themselves into that part of the system get shared, get mixed, right, get traded. In that, you know, my wife and I have a couple kids. They all kind of look like us, but they're slightly different. They have slightly different ways of seeing things. And so then what happens is over the course of many generations, the facts change or the facts get mixed. And it's just by a process of that particular evolution, that's what you're going to get. So even if you're able to ensure that the machinery that the model runs on is secure, and the data that it was given was all truthful, and the answers that are given are based off of that initial data, you're still going to have this generational overlap where things start to mix and match, and you're not going to be able to trace back through. Like, I'm a short guy with brown hair. Where did that come from? Well, you can go back and look at my lineage, and you can see that there's a bunch of those, right, over probably hundreds of years. But like, which one really caused it? Was it my great grandfather, or was it, his wife 3 times removed who had some, I don't know. But that's going to be the problem, is you're not going to be able to anchor the answer with a specific fact unless you limit it to what it can learn and what it can tell you within its lifetime.
That's really interesting. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but this same camera example, is that possible? How much storage does my phone need to have a ZK proof on it every time I take a picture?
I guess more of my question would be like, do we need ZK to do that, right? Like if Apple is going to sign within the Secure Enclave attesting that this image file was created by this phone, do we even need a ZK proof? It's just like a signature, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, but that's also saying like, oh, well, if Google ran the blockchain, then do we really need blockchains and cryptography? And I think certainly if you have images that are cross-platform, right, like is Google going to display Apple's native standard, or, even questions like that, I think that is like where the power of cryptography, which is this like sovereign, permissionless, openly composable by default standard, is like very powerful and important. And even with Google and their wallet, you could imagine that they just become the attester. They didn't really need to incorporate ZK, but they did use ZK because I think they probably see a lot of value in like not holding the responsibility of that proof. And so even they found value in it. So I don't see why other even large organizations wouldn't find value in it similarly.
Thanks, Uma. Sticking on this AI topic, and from the other angle, right? In all of your lines of work, are you seeing this in real life? Are you seeing AI being used to write code, write circuits, do formal verification, static analysis? Like, how on the back-end security side, model forming side, are you seeing, if you are seeing AI being used? Maybe we start with you, Uma.
Yeah, there was a really fun example where this guy who's a big hyperliquid whale, he doesn't know how to code, and he vibe coded over the weekend an SP1 application that basically proved he owned a bunch of addresses that had, I think, $25 million worth of hyperliquid across a bunch of his accounts. And then he used that to bootstrap an anonymous Twitter account without revealing exactly what his addresses were. So I thought that was a really cool example of someone who has no formal programming background or experience, just able to like now build with ZK thanks to SP1 and AI.
That's super cool. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing it used a lot. Both I've seen a lot of pitches from teams that are doing things like, hey, you can vibe code a smart contract, and that scares the shit out of me. But we're also seeing it get used on the like security side, and we're seeing a lot more security teams start to automate and use some of these LLM-based tools to go after and like try to identify vulnerabilities in code bases in advance. Talking to the founders of like one of the top security firms and one of the largest L1s back in January, they were saying that they both had gotten to a place where about 70 to 80% of the vulnerabilities that their security teams would have otherwise found, they can now just find on an automated basis using some of these tools now. And there still are some like, really hard, gnarly bugs that they need humans to find, but you can see where the trend line is going. And I think that we're only going to get better and better at having AI agents being able to help us secure our code bases. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like very bullish that, in addition to a lot of these like open contest platforms and other things that have been coming up, that we're actually like getting really close to more or less solving smart contract security over the next couple of years because these tools are getting so good.
Well, and along those lines, so Midnight actually has a strategy to engage with the AI community. I think it'd be a mistake not to. And so we have partners that are working on AI agents, the similar ones that you're used to, the Claudes of the world, things like that, because we think that's going to be an interface that many people will just interact with, right? They don't need to live with the UX of a blockchain. They can just simply ask their agent to make a trade for them or have some intent, and the agent can take care of what's under the covers. In addition to that, we're building out components to enable the developers. So actually integrating things with various IDEs so that as you're doing your development, you can say, hey, go install the Midnight code, and it'll go search the internet and chew through all the things it has to do and get it in place. And then eventually train it to be able to program in Compact, which is a TypeScript-like language. So we don't have millions and millions of lines of code like SP1 can work off of, but we're starting to build up that bulk to where we have enough to be able to train these particular agents. And what it starts to do is it starts to kind of solve where are you going, right? So if you're working with an industrial company, they're going to want the really rigid interaction where you have the wallet, you have the interface, you're running the node, you got to know everything about it, and it's a pain. And then you're going to have these other organizations that are going to be much more lively, much more agile, and they're going to want it in the tools that they're enabling their developers to use, like these agentic IDEs or these client apps where they can just ask it questions. And then the novelty that Midnight provides is that we separate the public and the private state. So you can introduce private information into a transaction without that information ever going to the chain by using ZK. You build a proof on your side, and then you submit the verification to the chain. So now just imagine your agent is doing this and it has private information. Now it's got an asymmetric advantage about whatever activity it's going to go do for you that it can take advantage of. And if that private information is useful to, let's say, other agents in my fleet of agents that are doing whatever work it is that I need them to do, then it could be shared with them and only them, and I can still keep that advantage that I've built up over time.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit surprised that we're seeing AI already for ZK. Kind of makes me wonder, where's the security now? What am I trusting? Am I trusting the math in the circuits? Am I trusting the implementation? Or am I trusting some vibe coder who builds up something? It's weird. It's also exciting.
Well, he got it audited after, so
By an AI?
He vibe coded it, but then the audit makes sure that he actually had good content.
Okay, that's reassuring. It's still exciting.
Trust but verify, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and the nice part about this is automated tools are starting to show up to be able to determine whether or not your ZK circuits are deterministic, right? It's a little tricky to do. You can prove that they're correct. That's easy, right? All the cryptographers always have circuits that are correct, but are they deterministic? Can you twiddle the bits such that you get the same answer for a different input? And the nice thing is by having the community build this up and have big players coming in, these automated tools are showing up and you can integrate them in your CI, and you can know for a fact that your equality test or that your addition is both correct and deterministic. And so now you get pretty close to being able to say you have a sound system. I know it's an implementation, so soundness is a little tricky because you can't really prove it on an implementation, but you're pretty close to being able to have high assurance that the system's going to perform as it's supposed to.
That's lovely. So outside of AI, in the exciting realm, what is exciting to you right now? Let's not think too far in the future. Maybe like right now, next 12 months, what's exciting to you in the ZK space? Ben, we'll start with you.
The launch of Midnight.network, of course. So just shameless plug here real quick. We launched our tokenomics paper on Monday. I think you'll find it as an interesting way of separating the equity from the resource, which is a shielded resource, which is what allows you to do selective disclosure and other ZK properties in our system. The testnet's up and live, and mainnet's coming near the end of the year.
Okay. Love the quick plug. Dan?
So one of the areas that I've been very excited about is like web proofs. So ZK TLS, ZK email. I think being able to prove information from your Web 2 activity and be able to permissionlessly bring that proof on chain and tie it to financial outcomes is massively expansionary in terms of what we can do. I think the simplest case is when we get into kind of like airdrops and rewards. Right now, you're more or less restricted into targeting existing crypto users who have an address with some type of activity on chain. with these ZK approaches to TLS and email, you're now able to start proving activity for like anybody who is using the internet. And so if you've used, YouTube and Facebook and Google and Spotify and Netflix, like you can prove about your activity there. It's another way of almost like proof of humanity, especially with these like paid services. Like there's you're not going to be paying like $10 a month for a subscription, and it's not a real person with real history there. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that I think you can start doing when you're tapping into billions of internet users rather than tens of millions of crypto users.
So Dan, you see within the ZK TLS space, this Web 2, Web 3 bridge, what in the next 12 months specifically is exciting you?
There's a lot of teams that are finally starting to build. There's folks like I would say Pluto and Opacity and Reclaim and who are like kind of focused on providing tooling for zkTLS for people to use. And then there's a number of teams building really cool applications. There's some that are related to influencers and social and payouts. There's a lot that are focused on I think identity and credit scoring and banking and things like that. So I'm expecting an explosion of use cases, but right now it's we haven't seen a lot get live yet. But I think it's again the case that Uma highlighted at the beginning is like the tooling hasn't been there. And now there is finally tooling, and we're expecting to see an explosion of actual applications on top.
Uma, what's exciting you?
Well, I also have to be in his camp and say the launch of Succinct Network, our protocol, is very, very exciting. So basically, we're building this prover network where we're going to have provers all across the world be able to generate SP1 proofs faster and cheaper than you could do yourself. And that will enable things like real-time Ethereum proving in a decentralized, live, and very efficient way, which I'm excited about. I think on the application side, though, and I think applications are basically everything and like the most important thing, there's this new trend of verifiable exchanges becoming super popular. So obviously, I'm sure you know that things like Hyperliquid have achieved a lot of PMF. Exchanges and perpetuals are definitely one of the highest PMF application in crypto. Hyperliquid has varying degrees of verifiability depending on your comfort level with like what they're kind of doing. And there's this new crop of DEXs that are built with ZK verifiability for that use case that I think are launching around now or the next few months using ZK VMs. And I think that will be a huge driver of proof volume. So I'm very excited to see those go live, get usage, see the number of proofs go up and stuff like that.
Uma, I actually wanted to ask you for clubs, central limit order books with using ZK, what's something a lot of people get wrong about that in their thinking?
I think while the technology is really exciting, ultimately for those builders, like they're not just going to win just because they're using ZK or, like SP1 or whatever it is. I mean, obviously I would love if that was the case. But I think ultimately you need to provide a better product for your users to actually win over that market share. Now, I do think ZK can provide some interesting product primitives that do help you with this. So, for example, we have this one team called Hibachi that's building with SP1, and they have private, their exchange is private. So, for example, positions are private, liquidation levels are private, balances are private. And that's really nice because, for example, if you have a very large position open, you can't get hunted or things like that, which actually happened kind of recently on Hyperliquid. So that's like a really tangible case where ZK is providing a real product benefit. And I think that's something that's exciting. And like more builders, I think, should think along those lines of like, okay, how can I translate this amazing tech into net impact for my customers?
Yeah, ZK clubs are definitely exciting, especially from a hunting. I know the scenario you're talking about. Won't name names here. But okay, all of this is very exciting. But conversely, what is something that's maybe overhyped or doesn't even really need ZK? Or Dan, what's something that when you open a pitch deck, a VC pitch deck, and you see this, you close it immediately, right? Tell me, what is the least exciting thing in ZK?
I don't know if there's a least exciting thing in ZK. I think, Uma's highlighting, I think what is the biggest challenge in the pitches that I see, which is that people have these really cool product ideas of what they can build with this technology, but there hasn't been enough thought into what the product is going to be, or maybe they've even thought about the product, but they haven't thought how they're going to attract users to this product. And so the biggest challenge that we're seeing right now is the gap on like go-to-market plans with teams, where we'll have people who are very competent builders who have been in the space for a while. They see like what's possible now. They're excited about new tools, but they think that like this is obviously better. Here's the technology, here's the user benefit, and people will understand that. And unfortunately, like people's attention spans are really short, and attention is spread very thin over a lot of projects. And there's not a lot of kind of new users coming into crypto right now to do stuff on chain. And so if you're fighting for those existing users, you really need to know how you're going to get the attention and keep the attention there. Or if like some of them think they're going to be like bringing in non-crypto users, great. Like I want to see like what is your marketing strategy? How are you going to go out and bring those folks in? Because again, if you're in this room, you're obviously very interested in the technology and what's possible here. But we need to reach out and get people that like they don't give a shit about the technology. They just want the benefits of the product, and that they're going to learn about this and come use it.
Yeah, I'm going to say very much the same thing, right? You got to start with the product. If nobody wants it, it's a nice hobby. And if you're able to articulate what the value is of the product that you're offering, then you kind of back in to what the technology is, right? I might have a $100 problem, but if I have $1,000 technology, no one's going to buy it, right? If I have a 10-cent technology, it's going to fly off the shelf. So you got to focus with that. One thing that I do enjoy about the space at the moment is ZK is starting to be used for privacy. And we can say that word again. It's not against the rules to say privacy anymore. It was the way it was introduced. It was introduced for scaling, which was great, right? It was a technology that was used to take costs out of things that people actually wanted to participate in, and be able to roll all of that all of those transactions up into something small and put on chain. But that's really not what ZK was made for, right? ZK was made to enable you to reveal as little knowledge as possible, not just trust somebody else. So I think what's happening is the area of the space that I'm less enthralled with on the scaling side, it's still there, it's still doing fine, but it's losing in the limelight, and the privacy side starting to show back up. So I would say the overhyped is the scaling, but let's hype up the privacy.
I agree. I think the privacy piece is actually very underhyped. I've seen a ton of pitches for kind of like on-chain crypto native neobanks using stablecoins. I'm actually very bullish on the category. But I think one of the big gaps that I'm seeing in 99% of these pitches is they're not setting consumer expectations appropriately with regard to privacy. It's like everyone's like, okay, Venmo, maybe they're used to a little bit more like sharing, but like I don't think almost any of these teams are preparing people for the fact that they're using a single address to send and receive with everybody, and that their balance in what is being positioned as like a bank account replacement is viewable to anybody who's ever transacted with them. Like that's insane and very dangerous. And so I think we really need to get back to the benefits of privacy, the importance of privacy, because if we are really going to have a large portion of the world banking on chain, it needs to be private, or we're going to have so many problems, and it's going to be so much worse than the existing solutions people are using.
So on this topic of privacy, let's think of regulatory compliance, right? Where sometimes you have to have a public view key for the regulators, right? Is this the right path forward, or are we just building a backdoor by design?
So let me start with that. Okay, so you're building an application, and your application has some type of compliance requirement in it. And if you want to be able to support your customers, you have to, let's just say, check the box on certain capabilities. So you need to be able to build into those products the capability where potentially you could reveal some information about your customer, assuming that they agreed to this because they're using your service, and allow the regulator to see it. So that's up at the application level. So I want to be very clear with where these capabilities exist, what they are, and how they can be delivered. So in our system today, when you're building a DApp and building transactions, you get a viewing key, but it's yours. So if I would like to share my viewing key with Dan, because maybe he's my accountant and he's going to help me do my books at the end of the year, here you go, Dan. There you can see the transactions that were used with that particular key. But nobody else can because they don't have that information, and it lives up at the application level. And so having that type of, I'm not going to call it having that type of compliant capability is absolutely required. Otherwise, none of these applications can come on chain, and we might as well just forget about them. But you have to put it in the right place. It can't be something where, like, some foundation could say, hey, I'm going to reveal everything, because that's simply not the right place to put it. But if it's in the application, now all of a sudden the liabilities and the rights all land in the appropriate place with whoever's providing that particular capability, and they can inform their users what's going on. So you can make an informed choice. Do I want to use the stable coin that's going to reveal my coffee habit or not? I would prefer the one that doesn't.
Okay, so we're coming up on time. Let me ask a quick question. Like, let's do some lightning rounds. First one, we'll start with Uma. What keeps you up at night in terms of ZK and ZK security?
Our proof system is pretty complicated. So it's always like complicated things have more surface area for bugs. So we're always trying to get it audited and improve our security. But that's definitely something we're always trying to make better.
Yeah, I think that's very similar for me. It's like there are probably thousands of people who are qualified to secure smart contracts. There are maybe like hundreds of people at best who are qualified to go and like properly audit a lot of these proof systems. So it scares me that there are bugs.
I guess I don't know. I have similar concerns. I think we're taking tactics to ensure, at least to the best of our ability, that they don't exist, right? That we have a sound proving system. I'm sure things will slip through, but we're actively doing that. The things that keep me up at night are actually mostly working with our partners. We have a number of partners that we've publicly announced, and I think I could cutely say if we stopped signing them up today, we could probably announce them for the rest of the year without any issue. And so when you work with the partners, the fun part about working with the partners is they have opinions and they tell you what they are. And sometimes they're great, wonderful opinions. Everything's rosy, and other times not so much. And they're our battlefield. They're the ones that are finding the issues with the software. And I've had the luxury of having them around for about a year now, and we're not launching for another 6 months or so. So we can correct things, because once we get to mainnet and you launch a system with the proving system hiding in it, that adaptation gets way harder all of a sudden. And so by working with these partners, by ensuring they have what they want and being able to be responsive, that's what keeps me up at night. Then we have the ability to deliver the underlying infrastructure product that they want, and they can build on top, and they can be successful.
Okay, we're up on time, but this is going to be a yes or no question. 2030, everything is perfect, except should users who are using ZK know that they're using ZK? Yes or no? Uma?
No.
Dan? No?
No.
No? Abstracted away. Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Let's give it a hand for these lovely panelists.